Welcome everybody to yet another insight session looking at the US banking app market. And in this session, we're going to be looking at the regional banks. In particular, we're going to focus on regions, aren't we, Tony? And some great work that they've done since October.
Definitely. So I'll just jump in here and just share my screen and just cover off the banks we're going to look at today. And so in here we can see that there's three sets of banks we look at. So US national banks, US tier 1 banks, and US regional banks, which we'll look at today. So it covers TD Bank North America, Key Bank, Santander, Fifth Third, Regions, Huntington Bank, M&T, and Citizens. So I might just jump straight in, Glenn.
Go for it.
So let's have a look. So let's have a look here. So what we're looking at here is just some market trends. It looks like a bit of spaghetti going on here, but what I'll do, I'll just focus on a couple. Let's have a look at one, for example, looking at TD. What this is looking at is our engaged customer score. So what the engaged customer score is, it's a measure that's it's sensitive to real things happening with the app. So if there's a problem, this will detect it very easily and very quickly. We saw that with our national view of Wells Fargo when there was a big collapse in the score, and we saw that down to the day when that happened. In this case, just looking at TD still here, we can see that TD has actually moved along and had some issues in October, but they've picked up again to be really strong in March, and they've obviously solved a few of the issues, and we know what they are from looking elsewhere. There was some check scanning issues and problems there, and that looks to be resolved in March for them to sort of continue to be above 4 as they have been historically. But looking at a couple of
leaders, aren't they?
They are. They really push. They really push ahead, and they're really consistent. With the Canadian market, they're really consistent. In here, there's looks to be one issue where they've resolved that in a couple of months. They sort of turned that around. One of the things we're looking at here, though, is if I look at a couple of others, we see like Fifth Third is jumping around a fair bit, although they did lead the market in February temporarily. But again, there's issues that turn on and off for them. Now, one of the ones you mentioned up front was Regions. Now, Regions was sitting historically around a score of 3, but they picked up in a dramatic way in November. We can see that pick up here going from about 3 up to just below 4, so obviously well above 3.5. So what's happened there? Let's jump in and have a look. So one of the key things we can see here is that this is looking at Android versus iOS. And if I just focus on Android, we can see that the Android score is the one that's picked up. And because as with most banks, Android is dominant in terms of usage, we see that that movement there is the thing that's caused that change. If I look at just iOS on its own, it's remained fairly flat. It does jump around a little bit, but it's fairly flat across the board there. So it's Android's caused that jump up, which is great. They fixed something in there. Let's stick with Android, and then let's also stick with Regions and have a look at this particular view here. So what I'll do, I'll just step away from this right panel here so we can see what's going on. What I'm showing you now is what's called a SURF analysis. So it's around security and authentication, user interface, reliability, and features. And this is pain points. So the lower is better. So just be clear on that. When it gets high, it means you've got more problems in each of these areas. So one of the things looking at here is we can see that in that period pre that Regions movement, and I'll just make sure we're clear here of who we're speaking with about, this is Regions and Android. So because that's the key movement we've seen. Into October, there were some big issues around security, and they seem to have been fixed in November, and then continuously that's remained the same. What I can look at, though, let's clear off a few of these other ones and see how much of a change that security issue was. So we can see there, I'd call this sporadic. There's probably some attempted fixes, and that hasn't worked. And we can see there across 6 months into October, nearly 1 in 5 people are talking about login problems in October. Mm-hmm. So that's a big issue. It looks, though, as of the November update, that's retained itself across time. So very positive for Regions. Let's have a step in here and have a look at a bit of detail. So this is the same thing we're looking at. And what we can see here is this is looking at down to detailed topics on the left here. So unable to log in has a very specific thing, about 12%, it's gone down to 3. So 4 times lower than it was previously. So that's the main thing that's happened. They've fixed those login issues across time. And if we look on the right here, this is looking at some October feedback around logging into the app. So people just not being able to sign in and log in, they're just they can't get in there. They're trying to sign in and they can't, which must be very frustrating, which is why you're getting around 1 in 5 customers talking about it as an issue. So it's great they've actually fixed that. And it looks like one of the great things about it, it's a long-term fix. So it's cross time. They've done that for the past 6 months now, which is brilliant. One other thing I wanted to sort of talk about was having a look at the impacts of these fixes and not fixing something. So if I have a look at these US regional banks again, so again, this is looking at those SURF pillars, which is basically that, again, security, user interface, reliability, and features. And again, these are pain points, so lower is better. What we see here for regions, and this is looking at just in March, we see that in total, there is some overlap between these topics, but in total, it's looking at around 20%, somewhere there. And we can see they've got, they do have, for example, security and login issues at 4.7%, but that's a lot lower than the others like M&T, KeyBank, and Huntington, for example. So they're doing pretty well, and it looks like they're going the right direction. The leaders in this market, Fifth Third and TD Bank, they're doing pretty well. Like you can see there, the levels that they're at around 3% login issues. So essentially, they're non-existent to some extent. One of the things we do see though with the top tier banks, Citibank's a good example. They normally sit at around 10% in total for these, and you can see none of these actually hit that level, but they are pretty close. Like the likes of TD and Fifth Third are getting close, but they're not at that level just yet. And the thing with Citibank, for example, is consistency across time. So none of that sort of having a problem and trying to fix it. So it's always consistently at that higher level. So the good news, this time around is that if I go back to my original one, is that Regions has done a great job in picking their security issues up from October. So November's that sort of peak, and they've retained that for at least 6 months.
Yeah, fantastic insights there. And it just goes to show when you focus on the areas that can have the biggest impact, how much of an impact it can have to the overall and overarching, not just score. And it's all great to get the kudos in and around the rankings, but the user experience. And when you're getting that user experience, what's that doing? It's impacting retention, churn rates, and helping you acquire more customers. So thanks for the insights, my friend, and look forward to catching up with you again soon, where we are going to be looking at the tier 1 banks.
Brilliant. Thanks, Glenn.
Thanks, mate.